Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with HistoryThroughCards.com. I hope you're all doing very well today. This is the part two to my review of the 2025 National in Chicago, and I thought I'd go through some of my pickups, but also kind of explain from a historian's perspective what I think is going on in the hobby today through my experience at the National. And the first thing I wanted to kind of go over was this particular card right here, and I met so many great people at the National, and John Richard, is that it, buddy? I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce your last name, or Richard. Um, yeah, I'm not really good at people's last names, but and I butcher the English language pretty fiercely. You have to have a hobby, right? So that's mine apparently. Anyway, I met John of Wade Boggs fan, and I got to talk to him a little bit, which is fantastic. I really wanted to meet John for a long time now, and he's got just a great channel, and he's got some really nice cards as well. And so he was gracious enough to give me one of his cards here, and I'll show you the back of it, which looks like this. So, John, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and it was great to meet you. Anyway, um, there were a few other collectors there and YouTubers that I unfortunately didn't get to meet, and Doug from Joe Wood Collector was one of those. And I really did want to meet Doug and discuss the hobby with him, and he's got a great channel and some really fantastic pickups as well. I'm really impressed, by the way, not just with him, but also with John's pickups and his collection. And you know, a collection really is a representative of you, the collector, and it does say a little bit about who you are as a person, I think. And so, as you guys can see here, this 1909 1911 T206 Nap Lajoie, this actually is a very important card for me. And it well, way back in the day, I had this card when I was a kid, and I was going to a lot of the Hall's nostalgia auctions, and it's really the only reason why I got my driver's license, I think, because you know they used to have their Tuesday night auctions and their once a month Friday night auctions, and the only way I could get there was by a car, or thumbing a ride from my buddies or something else. So I got my driver's license just so I could go to these shows, and I picked up a lot of great cards back then. In fact, a lot of people did way back in the day, and getting a car, I know, is really important for a lot of teenagers because it means you can get a girlfriend and stuff. But there is no self-respecting woman that would ever find themselves in a 1984 Oldsmobile Shipbox Supreme. Anyway, that meant that I could go and to these auctions, these live auctions, and preview all the cards that were coming up. And one of these was this particular card right here. And I'm a big fan of history, obviously, history through cards, but also the history of the hobby and baseball and sports in general, and American history, which this set really represents history. And maybe, hopefully soon, I'll have my book finished and out there of the T206. And so, if you guys have ever read anything that I've written and not fallen asleep, because that sometimes does happen to me, you will notice that history interconnects with the T206 specifically. I had picked this card up when I was a kid at the Hall's auctions, and it was kind of expensive back then. Actually, it was 150, and again, that is expensive, especially when you're, I don't even think I was 19 when I picked this up. So I was going to college then, so I needed a way to buy and sell cards to pay for my college, and this was one of those cards that I unfortunately sold to a guy up in New York, and he initially thought that I was trying to do something funny with the card. It actually came back to me, and he thought I was trying to rip him off or something, and I sold it again, and I sold it to him after he had called the police on me, which was amazing. And he called me up actually, and that's, I guess, when you could call somebody through eBay. So he called me up and asked me what the heck happened to his card that I had just sold him, which was one of these. And the one I sold him was actually really, really nice. And it had 3 sharp corners, and the other one's a little rounded, but it was still a very nice card. And I sold it to him for $153, so I really didn't make out on that deal, and I sold it to him again. And he did call the police on me, but it was resolved, and I shipped out the card. I can't tell you how bad I felt afterwards about that. Not just because he called the cops on me, but because I had sold him the card, and he was such a snot about it too. And maybe he didn't realize that I was a kid, and I think at some point he probably said, "Oh my God, I just threatened a kid." And so anyway, I had felt really bad about that incident ever since. And there are certain cards that you sell and you really can't look at again, because that memory of something that you knew that was wrong, it comes back to haunt you every time you see that card. Or it could be anything really, but in this case it was this particular card. And there are a few times that this has actually happened as well. It wasn't the last time. I had actually bought a 1909-1911 American Caramel Eddie Plank at a Hall's auction for $53 in good condition, and I sold it for $60. And little did I know, or probably a lot of other people at the same time too, in the 1990s, that these cards would go for so much money that you just can't afford them again. And we're going to get into that. Let me show you the back of this card right here. So the gentleman that I got this card from, I was really surprised to actually see it, because I didn't see too many of these at the National. Very little T206s actually that I saw. And the thing is that there were so many people there that it was kind of concerning to me. Just the amount of fans and collectors there. They said that there was about 125,000, but up to like 127,000 could easily have been there. And even with 2 floors, I mean, that's still a lot of people, and it was at some times just very overwhelming. The entire experience of the National can be very overwhelming, and I could see if somebody has like Asperger's or something like that, that might not be the place for them because of sensory overload, information overload. And I don't have Asperger's or anything like that. So, and even I was like, oh my God, there's so much here. Like, what do I focus on? And so I was like all over the place at certain times. And certain times I just couldn't focus on the thing that I really was trying to look at. And unfortunately, I think this can happen. It doesn't matter if you have Asperger's or whatever the case may be. that can happen. I think to anybody. But anyway, this is actually a really nice card, I think. And the guy that I purchased this from, he had a price tag of $550, and I thought about it. I'm like, that seems pretty high, and obviously, like I'm thinking back to when I had first bought this card, and it is a 1.5, and I got it for 500. And again, we're going to talk more about the value and the prices paid at the National, and really what's kind of going on now. And I'm really sorry about um, my camera does not like to pick up cards as much as I do, so it gets a little blurry and confused. It gets confused. I don't think it knows what to focus on, um, which is too bad because I like detail and to show you guys. But the Nap Lajoie here, he's right up there with Ty Cobb, in fact. And 1901, I believe he got the American League batting title, or he definitely hit 400. I want to say 401, but it could be more than that. But he's a 400 batting average guy. He's 400 guy, and he, interestingly enough, he caused a lawsuit in 1902. Him and Elmer Flick, and I'll discuss more of that in my book on the T206. But that lawsuit was the reason why he's here on the Cleveland. I believe it's it's the Naps, but I believe it was the Blues. And before that, it was the Cleveland Spiders in 1899. They got the worst record of baseball up until the White Sox in last year when they lost 121 games. But when he was with the Naps, they changed their name for him. I believe he was the captain of the team, and probably the highest paid too. But what's really interesting about him is that he ended up being a very savvy businessman later on in life, and he had a lot to say about the players of the 1920s and 1930s when he was interviewed in the press. And he first started saying, like, well, in my day, like, we never had players like this. And he's talking about Jimmy Fox and Babe Ruth, and which he would have played against too. He would have played against Babe Ruth, but he was really kind of taken aback at the salaries that some of the guys who were playing back in the 1930s were making in 1920s too. And he thought that a lot of the dead ball era players were actually better players than the guys playing in the 1920s and 1930s. And he really kind of felt that the players of the Great Depression had an advantage over his generation of players with the live ball, and that was really a bone of contention with him. But he also has a very interesting story too with Gowdy as well, and I did do a long form article about that, and it may have been like a last gap stop measure for Gowdy to have him included. First, a lot of people don't realize that he's a New England native, and he played here in Massachusetts for a brief time, and then I believe Fall River, and then he also grew up in I believe it was Woonsocket, Rhode Island. I could be wrong about Woonsocket, but he was definitely a Rhode Island native, and so with him being retired in 1933, Gowdy really didn't have to go through the copyright process, and they could bypass any player at the time. Basically, if the player was retired, there was nothing in the Copyright Office that said that he had to sign away his likeness and image for a company, and he was actually one of the first players to do a deal with a company as a player. I thought that was really interesting. But getting back to this particular card right here, it's a 1.5 at $500, and 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, even less, that that really probably wouldn't have flown at all. People wouldn't have paid that for what they're paying now. And I mean, again, I had a choice. I could have walked away, but the dealer was so nice, and he was really great to do business with. He apparently had just bought this card when he put it in his case, and so I really wanted this card, and that's the other thing, is that there are certain cards that you want, and I wanted this card because not only is it a beautiful card, the image and the artwork associated with a lot of these old tobacco cards in the T206, they did a great job over at American Lithograph Company in New York when they produced these. The original photograph, though, has a C on it, and it's a little bit different. I think it dates to 1902, 1903, right when he was going to the Cleveland Naps, and they may have still been the Blues. But anyway, I really wanted the card because really what it did was that it washed away a lot of the hurt feelings that I had towards that experience when I did sell this card initially. And I don't really mind that it's a 1.5. I really like the image, and I like the history of the card, and my own personal history with it has changed as really for the better, I think. So there's another card here that I want to show you guys, and it is this right here. And Christy Mathewson, the 1911 T205, and I always wanted this card even before I was a vintage card collector. This card was in a lot of magazines that I would have read back in the day, and a lot of Beckett magazines as well. And Christy Mathewson's story is just absolutely amazing. By this point in time, he already won several World Series. The 1905 World Series, I believe it was his first. He's got an incredible All-American story, and I thought that this was probably one of his best cards. And I did see a number of these cards at the National, but the thing about the T205s, I mean, if I'm as old as this thing is, I'm not going to look as good, okay? But there is a little bit of a crease here, which is, it goes through the face, but it's like a hairline crease, and I really don't mind. It's a poor one, and I feel that PSA has gotten a lot tougher over the last number of years or so. So a lot of people say it's the eye appeal that you're looking for, and not the particular grade. And I actually agree with that. And there's also certain cards too that you're not going to find in high grade anyway, especially when you're talking about vintage. And so again, like if you guys go on vintage card prices, you'll be able to know exactly what the cards here are valued at in the grades. So I'm not going to be able to like say like anything other than that. I can tell you what I did pay for this was $7.25, and that was a lot. But also, this card taught me a very valuable lesson. And historically, for me, I always stuck to my guns on a certain price for a card that I would not go over, and that was $200 per card. But that really hurt me as well over the years. And $200 in, say, like, 1999 or 2000 or even 2005, 2007, you could get some really, really nice uh, vintage Hall of Famers and key cards. Unfortunately, today you can't do that for the most part. It is very difficult and you will be limited. And this did limit me because I was so rigid in my collecting habits and not spending over the $200 threshold that I had for myself. I missed out on a 1934 Gaudi Lou Gehrig number 37 for 600 back in 2001. I missed out on a 1954 Topps Hank Aaron rookie for 400. Now you could have gotten Hank Aaron's rookie and 56 Mickey Mantle's his Topps for 400. Those were going for about 350, 400 prior to the pandemic. And I missed out on a 39 play ball Ted Williams for 400 as well. And so this did hurt me pretty badly, actually. Financially speaking, it hurt me. And there are certain cards that I really would have liked to have added. But there's always a cost, and it's not just financial either sometimes. So at 725, I really had to step back and say, okay, like what are the pros and cons of buying this card? Because it is actually the most expensive card that I've ever purchased. And I said, okay, I've always wanted this ever since I was a kid. I love Christy Mathewson's story. It transcends baseball. It's the fact that he's a World War I veteran. He died because of his service, directly service-connected death through tuberculosis. However, with that too, his brother also died of tuberculosis, so he may have been susceptible prior to his enlistment. And so the jury's still out on that. And then again, like if you actually read this, what happened during his enlistment, there were a lot of celebrities, a lot of retired ball players, and ball players kind of just coming up who enlisted in the gas and flame division. And the gas and flame division, actually, they changed their name. And Ned Hanlon's son ended up getting killed in action. He was I believe, maybe a major or a captain. But he led that until his passing in World War One, and then a lot of other really famous ball players started to enlist in that particular division, and it was one of the most dangerous divisions during World War One that I'm aware of. And so during a training accident, Branch Rickey and Ty Cobb actually ended up getting a nice dose of whatever chemical that they were exposed to. I don't know if it was chloroform or if it definitely wasn't mustard gas, but it was something. And there was a whole bunch of different chemicals that they were using during World War One, and unfortunately, this affected a lot of other veterans as well throughout their years, and there is a higher death rate for World War One veterans, as there is for Gulf War veterans. In fact, going after World War One and after the Gulf War. So chemical agents were responsible for a lot of deaths after the war, shortened their lives for sure. And Ty Cobb, he was in the hospital for a number of months, just kind of throwing up this green stuff from his lungs, which again, I don't know what they were exposed to, but he also was the majority owner after his retirement, and I think he retired in 1916, but he was the majority owner of the Boston Braves, and the minority owner was Emil Fuchs, and he was the president of the club. And then when he had passed away, Emil Fuchs ended up being the majority owner of the Braves, and he ended up buying Babe Ruth in 1935, and that's really where you get the movie The Natural from and the book. So it's based on that, but it could have turned out a little bit different had he actually survived longer. Anyway, I'll show you the back of this card, and I really love the T205. I think it's one of my favorite card sets of all time, just because of the design and the color. Piedmont cigarettes were one of the most popular cigarette brands of the 1910s, and I want to say they stopped production in 1969 or 1973, something around there. They stopped production here in the United States, but I think they continued up in Canada for a short time. So I thought this was great. There's also a few other different, I guess, variations of this. I think it's the I don't entirely know if it's the games here, the win loss record, but there's definitely a different variation of it, and I'm sorry guys, I forget off the top of my head what that is, but again, I thought this was something that I really wanted to add to my collection, because I'm not entirely sure if I'd ever be able to purchase one again, and sometimes you have to kind of go with what is available, and I had circled and just I saw this card, and I had done business with the dealer before back in 2022 at the National in Atlantic City, so he was great to deal with. The thing is, like, I saw this and I immediately thought to myself, oh, that's out of my price range anyway. But I had just asked, I was like, hey, by the way, how much are you asking for your Christy Mathewson here? And he gave me the price of he's like, for you, $725. And I was like, could you do any less and or any better? And he's like, no. He's like, I can't do that. He's like, I had this card since 1972, and he's like, I'm selling my collection now. I mean, that's a long time to keep a collection and a card. So like, I can kind of relate, because the majority of my collection I've had since I was a kid, and with ever since I've gotten out of college, I rebuilt. Specifically, I rebuilt my hockey collection, but I had to rebuild a lot of my collection after I sold it to go to college, and I didn't have any debts afterwards. So that was the good thing. And going to college, for me personally, it was a great time. I went to school for design, and I still carry on that tradition, I guess. But again, like, I was an artist before I went to college, and I was an artist afterwards. So college actually did help me hone in my skills, and it wasn't all that expensive either. So again, it really did kind of work out in a lot of ways. But getting back to this real quickly, I had circled around for a while. Just I left. You know that nagging feeling that you sometimes get? Like, I had that nagging feeling. I can't quite explain it, but there was a little voice in my head saying, "Go back. You need to go back, and you need to get that card." And I went back, and the card was still there, and I made the purchase, and again, $725 is a hell of a lot of money. It really is, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what the financial future holds for pre-war cards or cards in general. Did I make the right decision? Yeah, I think I did. Was it an expensive decision? Yes, it was, but at the end of the day, you have to be happy with what you have. And for me, this represents a great man, a great American, a war hero, somebody who didn't have to fight in World War I. He was over the age. He had two dependents, young kids, a wife, and he would have had a very successful business career afterwards, I'm pretty sure. And he didn't have to go into World War One. He was essentially exempt because of his status, because he had kids. So, although looking back on it too, my great grandfather was in World War One, and he had like 7 kids at that point, and my grandmother on the way. So, they would draft you anyway. So he was above the limit though. Anyway, getting on to another card here. I have had this card on my list for a very long time. Jerry Cheever's rookie, 1965 Topps. This is a bucket list card for me, as is the Mathewson here too, and actually a few other cards. This card's normally very expensive because it is his rookie. Also, if you're into the design, which I am, I love this design. I've heard from a lot of other dealers and collectors that Topps, for whatever reason, they didn't print a lot of 1965 Topps hockey, and I've heard that basketball, hockey, and football were printed at 1/3 that of baseball. Whether or not that's true, I am not sure, but that's what I've heard. And specifically with 1965 Topps, you can find these in like near mint condition. Really nice corner. These corners are usually great on these, and they're very sharp for the most part. The printing is usually not bad, but I've noticed over the years that there can be a lot of problems with them, and specifically centering has been a major issue on the 1965 Topps, and also print streaks as well, and what they call fisheye, which is like a print bubble. And usually with the darker the card, the more snow it will get, and that's because there's a lot of ink that usually doesn't dry, or it detaches later on because there's too much. But again, I really wanted this card, and this card was actually pretty cheap for me. It was like $200, and it came from a friend of mine, which is probably why I got it for a really nice deal. And again, it is a dream card of mine. I'm not going to say it's a grail card, because I don't really like that term. The Holy Grail is a different story altogether, which I'll probably talk about if I can, if there's a card of the Holy Grail, that is. But hockey for me, it's a very interesting experience, because I really do love hockey. I used to watch the Bruins, and if the Bruins weren't on, I could always watch the Whale, the Hartford Whalers. And so I actually I actually bought a lot of hockey at the National, which was kind of surprising, because you don't really see a whole lot of hockey at shows, at least not around here anyway. But this is a 1953 Parkhurst of Gordie Howe, and I do have a few other Gordie Howe cards. One of the most meaningful Gordie Howe cards that I have in my collection is a 1957 Topps, and I did a video on that and why it really means a lot to me, far more than the price tag, and how I actually acquired that, and why it is. So you guys can always go through my my list of videos on my channel, and just watch up on that. But one of the Gordie Howe cards that I always wanted was this, and I had met Gordie Howe on several occasions and had some really nice conversations with him. I was kind of surprised just how tall he was. Very large guy. Him and Milt Schmidt both. Milt Schmidt I knew when he was in his late 80s and 90s, and I didn't pick up any Milt Schmidt cards. There is one that I want, the 54 Parkhurst Milt Schmidt, but he was he was really interesting to talk to, and I met him through Johnny Pesky, and Johnny Pesky and Milt Schmidt were really good friends going back to the 1930s. So that was what, a 60-year friendship. Anyway, getting back to Mr. Howe here, he's got a lot of cards out there, but his early stuff is really expensive, especially his rookie, which is a 1951 Parkhurst. If you're going to get into specifically the 1953 and 54 Parkhursts, toning is a huge issue with this set and the 50 and the 54. But toning can really ruin these cards. This one's okay. There's not a whole lot there, but it happens naturally, I think, and the stock of the 53s is not good. It's really kind of weak, and that's probably why you get a lot of toning. And this one, it's a good 2, but it's a really fantastic card, and the image is just amazing, I think. And I've been wanting this card for a very long time because I'm a big fan of Gordie Howe, and I'll show you the back of it. And there's 2 different backs for these. One is it's an advertising back for a camera. Again, the other thing you need to look out too, especially when you're doing any kind of buying of these online on eBay, is that they can hide creases. So the centering can be really off, and creases can be very difficult to see. At least that's been my experience, but everybody has a different experience. But again, I wanted to show you this card. It's just really fantastic. The other Gordie Howe card I do have is the 54 Parkhurst, which has a giant crease on it. I still love the card because I'm a big fan of Gordie Howe, but this one can set you back a little bit. And I wrote down what I paid for it, and it wasn't that bad. I was actually kind of surprised that I think I paid like $250, something like that. It wasn't that bad, but so that's Mr. Howe. And then there's another hockey card here that I want to show you, and that is Maurice Rocket Richard, and it's not Richard, it's Richard. And so this is a card that I never really thought that I would actually own. I do have a 1945-54 Quaker Oats Premium of Rocket Richard, but that's not the same thing as actually owning one of his cards. And he is definitely a legend. I mean, everything I've heard about this guy is just amazing. Every story I heard about him is, the next story is better than the last one. So, he actually caused a riot during him and Hal Laco of the Bruins caused a riot up in Montreal. And actually, I think that riot was caused through race relations, just say. But his statistics are amazing, and his story is really fantastic. But he's also very expensive too. Whatever card that you get of him, it's normally going to be pretty expensive. And this card initially, the guy wanted $450, and I got it down to I want to say $375, which is still expensive. The same thing I just said about the 1953 Parkhurst Gordie Howe still applies to this card right here. The centering is actually really nice on this. Creases, I've seen a lot of these cards with creases and rounded corners, and neither of these cards have rounded corners. But I really enjoy the artwork on these cards here. So this set, if you were to complete this set, this card's going to set you back the Gordie Howe is going to set you back a little bit. The card that's going to set you back the most, if you're trying to complete this set, is the Jean Beliveau rookie, and I did see one there in a one, is a PSA 1, and I didn't feel comfortable paying $550 for that card, and it had some paper loss on it. Sorry guys, sorry about that. It did have some paper loss on it, and I didn't feel comfortable paying $550 for it as a 1. And stuff like that, it wouldn't have happened 20, 25, 30 years ago. You wouldn't be paying exorbitant amount of prices for low grade cards. Generally, when I was growing up in the 90s and I was learning the ropes of the hobby from older collectors, they would always say that your average collector grade was a PSA 5. Now PSA was kind of brand new when I was first starting out, and then we'll get into that a little bit later here. But this was another card that I really wanted for my collection, and it's not just because it's Jacques Plante. I actually ran into somebody who didn't know who Jacques Plante was, and I was really kind of shocked. But then I started to think, okay, like, you know, we have a lot of collectors just coming into the hobby, or they got out of the hobby and they're getting back in, because a lot of times they're getting back in because their kids are growing up, and it's an experience for not just for them to share, but with their kids as well. So I understand that completely, and you know, I can relate to that. I mean, you know, my dad collected cards when he was a kid back in the 1950s and 60s, and he got back into collecting cards with me, completing sets of, say, 1986 tops or 1987 or 88 tops. And you know, we'd always go through the players and the cards and all that, and trying to complete these sets, and it was a really great bonding experience with my dad, and I learned a lot of lessons too through him, obviously. And one of those was Wade Boggs, actually, during the Margot Adams affair. Jacques Plante is one of the greatest goalies of all time, and I had a few cards of him, I still do. But back in 2004, when I was at the National, that was actually my first National, and I was there with a buddy of mine named Bob, and he was actually a little bit older than my father, and so he had. It was really great to first off, he was my friend, one of my closest friends. He remembered collecting cards in the 1950s, and he sold his collection, I think, during college, but he got back into it, and he started to work at a card shop, just to kind of pass the time. And you know, like, his kids were they were young, so he needed something to do as well, and he got back into card collecting. And one of the cards that he really wanted was this particular card. And during the 2004 National, I was hanging out with him, and he asked me about this card because he's like, I really want this card, and he paid a lot for it. And at the time, I was like, I'm not familiar or terribly familiar with Jacques Plante. So he kind of like sat me aside and said, this is why Jacques Plante is important. This is his career, and you really should read up on some of the players that you want for your collection, or what you're looking at. And that's what he did, was like, he kind of like showed me the ropes of not just the hobby, but who some of the players were. And it's one thing to actually see a card, but if you see a card and you don't understand why that card is important, or the meaning behind it, or who the player is, it kind of defeats the purpose of card collecting. But everybody is on their own journey here as well, and you can't know everything. It's impossible. And one of life's journeys, I guess, is education. and learning things at your own pace as well, and making mistakes. One thing I've noticed about these younger generations is that they're afraid to make mistakes. And I can understand this to a certain extent, just because of the prices that are paid for a lot of these cards. Um, but that also requires a lot of education too. If you're going to get into a lot of these cards and pay the prices that we're seeing for them, that does require a certain amount of education before you even make a purchase. And this set right here is the 1957-58 Parkhurst. It's by KSA, which is basically the Canadian version of PSA. And I'll show you the back of these. You know, one thing I've noticed with these cards too, I'll flip it over here real quick. These can bleed. The red here can bleed into the border, and you can find a lot of creases here. And if you're just buying online, sometimes again the creases, especially the hairline creases, can be tricky to spot, especially with this particular card. This card is not rare, and I do see it quite often. But I really wanted this card because, you know, not just because it's Jacques Plante, but because of my memories of my buddy Bob, who had bought this card, and he really loved it. It was one of his favorites. Unfortunately, he has since passed on. But anyway, the backs of these cards don't say anything that I'm aware of being from Parkhurst. And Parkhurst is, to me, it's the Canadian equivalent of Bowman. Really, really great company, and they had some really, really nice cards when they were around. So I really enjoy this card. It's one of my favorites, actually. I am very glad that I actually picked it up. Another card that I picked up is this 1961 Flair Oscar Robertson rookie, and it wasn't even on my radar. I wasn't even looking for this card. In fact, I didn't even think that I'd ever be able to own a card like this. I was actually looking for a 1961 Flair Jerry West rookie, which again, I passed that card up, particularly because I had just bought a 1961 Flair Wilt Chamberlain for $200, and the Jerry West rookie was right next to it. The guy wanted 184. This was back in 2007, and it wasn't like I didn't have the money for it. I did, but I passed it up, and it was really kind of foolish of me. So I wanted to kind of correct that mistake, and that's kind of like what I was trying to do at this national. I'm not going to be collecting cards forever. At some point, I am going to stop, just because it's gotten so out of hand with the prices, which I'm going to talk about afterwards. But I was at Stan Locke's table, and Stan has a lot of really great stuff. He's not the cheapest guy in the world, but he has great stuff. He talks the talk and he walks the walk. So you know exactly what you're getting when you're doing business with Stan. So I came across this card, and I saw the price tag. It was $800, and I was like, oh my god. I actually, so going into the national, I sold a lot of stuff so I could actually make specific purchases. I didn't make all the purchases that I wanted to. I didn't see all the cards that I thought I would. When they say that if it's not at the national, it doesn't exist, I'm not entirely sure that that's true, because I definitely know that there are cards that I didn't see that definitely exist, but it's the price tag of this $800. I had actually sold my 1954 Topps Al Kaline rookie, and a number of other cards so I could pay for this. And is it worth it? You know, the jury's still out on that. I did get a nice t-shirt from Stan as well. I truly do not understand why some of these cards are valued the way they are, specifically because when I was a kid collecting in the 1990s and early 2000s, the stuff was not expensive. You weren't losing your shirt. They weren't breaking the bank. You could actually complete a 1961 Flair set, which I had a near complete set, which I did sell, and I only kept one card, and that paid for a semester of college. So I understand, like, you know, the buying and selling aspect of the hobby. Like, I completely get that, and I'm not like bad mouthing it at all. For the most part, I just don't understand how some of these cards have gotten to where they become so unaffordable for the average person that it is now a hindrance for a lot of people, and I'll get into that. But I love the 1961 Flair. It's one of my all-time favorite basketball sets, aside from, say, the 1971 and 72 Topps basketball, which is, I've told you guys in the past, that's one of my, both those sets are just incredible. The design goes a long way as to whether or not a card value will hold through time, and whether or not it's collectible or not, and also the photography as well. This though, this is his rookie, and Oscar Robertson, I'll probably do a video specifically on him, but again, there are cards that you'll come across that weren't even on your radar, and it's just the fact that this is not a rare card. Most Flairs from 61 are not rare, but they are expensive. This is an increasingly expensive set. If you're gonna get into like a 61 Flair set or the cards themselves, centering is always an issue. Print streaks are another issue altogether, and I think centering is the biggest one. Now, if I flip this over, I have noticed that this right here can be off a little bit where there's another line, and then it can also be faded as well. This blue can be faded, and you are going to find toning around the edges as well. So it's not as prevalent as, say, the Parkhurst cards that I showed you, but it will be there for the most part. This doesn't have any. But again, like, if I didn't sell any of those cards, I wouldn't have this card. So it's for me, I was okay with it because I knew exactly what I wanted and what I wanted to do, what my goals were for the most part, and that meant that I had to sell certain cards to get into others and slim down my collection. So again, I am going to talk more about Oscar Robertson, and not only is he a great ball player and Hall of Famer, but he's got an amazing story as well as an NBA player, and I'll definitely get into it. But I really wanted to show you this, and also too, that's a really cool logo of a team that no longer exists, the Cincinnati Royals, which I believe are the Sacramento Kings. You guys can tell me in the comment section below if that is correct. I picked up another T205. This time it's Eddie Collins, one of the greatest second basemen. I'm pretty sure he's a second baseman. Let me see if it says here if he is. Yep, I was correct. Sometimes I'm not always correct, which is good. It'd be really boring if I was right on everything. I also like to learn as well, so learn from other people and other collectors. And I I purchased this for 160, and I know Matt from Providence really loves Eddie Collins. Eddie Collins, he's very prominent as probably one of the greatest second basemen of the dead ball era, and he has a lot to say about the 1919 World Series. He's one of the clean Sox, but I think he was also an instigator in a lot of that as well, what happened on the 1919 White Sox and 1917. But again, like when you're purchasing the T205s, just keep in mind that um, the corners, the gold itself, the gold leaf here can chip very easily, and this one is not perfect. Um, I I want to say that I got this from Howard Chaser, but there was a number of dealers there that Sammy Thunder had recommended, and one of the dealers, and I can't remember exactly who it was. I have a photo of him, but that doesn't really mean much. Sammy Thunder had recommended at least 5 to 10 dealers that you should go and try to do business with, and one of those dealers was the gentleman that I got this card from. Again, I think it's Howard Chaser, but and I think he's from South Carolina or North, one of them. Anyway, one of the Carolinas. Anyway, Sammy, thank you very much. I really appreciated that. That was very helpful, by the way. And so I did walk away with a very nice T205 of Eddie Collins. And Eddie Collins, later on in his career, he became a general manager of the Red Sox. And was that successful? Yeah, to a certain extent. He got Ted Williams and Bobby Doerr, and I think Dom DiMaggio and a number of other players, Jimmy Fox. But there's another aspect to him too, which I really don't like, and that's also kind of universal too with the Red Sox of the 1930s and 40s and 50s, where Pumpsie Green became the first black ball player on the Sox, and that was because racism on the club, not on the club, I don't think, management was rampant. You know, between Mike Pinky Higgins as the manager, to Tom Yawkey, to Joe Cronin especially, they really screwed themselves, the Red Sox did, back in the 1940s and 50s and even the late 30s. But again, there's another aspect to this too, where people people say, like, well, the Red Sox were the last club to have a black ball player. The Tigers also just got a black ball player too, and the Yankees, and so there were a number of ball clubs by the time that the Red Sox, and they were the last. But also, you always have to look at the fans as well, and the fan base, and what Clark Griffith said back in 1938 when he wanted to hire Josh Gibson was that he had no problem hiring Josh Gibson in 1938, but he said that the fans would have absolutely destroyed him if that happened, and so they actually would lease out the ball clubs, the ball fields, to the Negro Leagues. Looking at it through a business lens, a business standpoint, leasing out these stadiums to the Negro Leagues was a good business decision, but the fans had a lot to say as well, whether or not that they would accept a black ball player on a white team. And Buck O'Neil actually said that in 1948 or 1947, when Jackie Robinson was basically brought up to the Dodgers, he said he knew that the Negro Leagues had ended when Jackie Robinson was brought up, and he was right. The Negro Leagues actually had a very storied and proud history all to themselves, and it's a different story altogether. But can you imagine the Red Sox of the 1940s if they had brought up Jackie Robinson or Monty Irvin or Hitter Williams, the guy Marvin Williams, or Sam Jethro? And again, a lot of this was at the feet of this guy right here too, and not just Tom Yawkey. And a lot of people say, yeah, Tom Yawkey was a racist. Was he really? Is there any actual documented proof that he was a racist? I would say that really anybody in an organization could have been racist, but if you could say that about anybody, and I wouldn't. I don't think that's not a smart move at all, unless you have actual documented proof. And for me being a journalist, I want to see documented proof. I don't want to just hear that XYZ happened without someone having to back it up. Aside from his general manager duties, which I think were pretty good, he is definitely the greatest second baseman of the first half of the 20th century by far. If you guys can name a few other great second basemen other than, and they say Bobby Doerr, okay, fine. And speaking of Bobby Doerr, I also had to pick up this card right here, and this is a 1938 Goudey heads up Bobby Doerr. This is not Bobby Doerr's rookie. That is a 1937 National Chickle Fine Pen Premium, but this is on a lot of people's want lists, and what I've heard is that a number of these cards were bought at the National, this particular card. Now there are two different versions, and if you're not familiar with this set, and you can't really assume that everybody who's watching this video right now is familiar with any of these cards, but because everybody's been there, right? Everybody was a novice at one point or time in the hobby. This card actually means a lot to me because I knew Bobby Doerr for quite a long time, and I had some really great conversations with Bobby over the years, him and Dom DiMaggio and Johnny Pesky, just because of where I live here in Boston. And those guys would often show up at card shows, and they were often in the community. Dom DiMaggio, not so much. He split his time between Hadley, Mass, and Florida. Bobby Doerr was on the other coast, but he'd always come back here. And he took care of his wife, who was often sick. And there is a book called The Teammates. I don't really like that book, to tell you the truth. But it has been, I think Lee Montvale, is that him? I think he did that. Anyway, Bobby Doerr's roommate was Moe Berg. So he had a few really interesting stories about Moe Berg. And Moe Berg is in the 1933 Goudey set. He's also got a 1935 National Chickle Wide Pen Premium, which actually I do have. I kind of forgot about that. He had a really interesting experience, as he said, back when he was a rookie in 1937. I think he came up with. I'm not sure if that will say in the back here, or if you guys can actually read it, because it is quite blurry, unfortunately. But he got beaten in the head when he was a rookie, and he spent at least a month in the hospital. And he said beatings would happen all the time, and it was such a problem. They didn't know really what to do about it. They tried everything in the book, and nothing really stuck around. And that's actually what happened to Jimmy Fox was. And I heard about the story, but I wasn't quite clear on it. And so I asked Johnny Pesky, and he's like, I'm not really sure. He's like, why don't you ask Dom DiMaggio? And so I did. And Dom was Jimmy Fox's roommate. And he had gotten beaten in the head, Jimmy Fox did. And he was afraid after that of going up to the plate, thinking that he was going to get beamed again. and he ended up being traded from the Red Sox to the Cubs, and management didn't tell him. It was Dom DiMaggio who told him that he was traded, and I believe he was on the road and he couldn't get into his hotel, and I think that's what happened. They didn't make reservations for Jimmy Fox. I think they treated him like crap. To tell you the truth, from everything that Dom had said, and Jimmy Fox actually wanted to room. He asked specifically to room with Dom DiMaggio so he could teach him the ropes of the game, because it was different from when Dom was playing in the PCL, and I think Dom actually got the 1939 PCL MVP, or Most Valuable Player award. So I mean his stats are just ridiculous. But getting back to Bobby Doerr here, it's kind of funny. I can't talk about one without talking about the other guys. So Bobby Doerr, they saw him. I think it was Billy Evans who saw him first, or it was Eddie Collins. One of those two guys. They were on the road, and they saw Bobby Doerr, and they were gonna sign him, but then they saw this other kid named Ted Williams, and they took Bobby Doerr and they said, "We're gonna come back for this kid Ted Williams," and that's what happened. I actually do have a Ted Williams card here too that I picked up after. No, it was before the show. So I'll show you really quickly. I know Dustin, personal sports card dad, really wanted a Ted Williams card for his collection, and instead he got the 1952 Topps Willie Mays, which is a great card. That's a great pickup, Dustin. Really fantastic. But I saw a lot of the 1954 Topps Ted Williams, and it's not expensive. Let's just say it's expensive here in Massachusetts because it's Ted Williams, and he was the Red Sox. But outside of that, the National, there's a lot of these particular cards. So before I even went to the National, I knew that Matt from Providence was going to be at a show, and I really wanted to do business with him. He's great to do business with, and I know he was at the National. We didn't bump into each other, unfortunately, because that would have been fun. I know he's been on with Jake from Wax Pack Wisdom, and those are really great too. I really enjoy those two guys talking back and forth. But I picked this card up from Matt from Providence before I left. I had this card before, and I sold it because I just didn't like the way it looked. And sorry guys, it's really about the image and how a vintage card looks now instead of the actual numerical grade. So I picked this up, and actually it goes great with the is this the number? It's the number 1. So I have the last card in the set, number 250, and I've already spoken about the 1954 Topps Ted Williams and that set in a previous video, but I picked this up, and I'm like, thank God, and there's no creases in this particular card, which does happen often, and the corners as well. So that was even before I went and picked up a lot of these cards. This card though was not cheap, and it is not cheap. Again, it's not his rookie card, so a lot of people get that kind of confused, and I can definitely see why that they would. But it is a very popular card and a very popular set, the 1938 Gowdy Heads Up. And in 1937 through 1938, the United States was going through, they say a Great Depression, but actually this was the Depression already hit, and then it was getting a little bit better, and then a recession in 1937, and I think that was because of they were putzing around with the economics, and it just kind of went south. So when that happened, it really hurt Gaudi. It really did. Um, and a lot of the collectors of the 1933 Gaudi, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but um, the guys who were our hobby pioneers in the 1960s, they would have gone after cards of the 1930s, and instead of like Jefferson Burdick, who started the hobby because of the T206. That was, I mean, that was the set that he remembered as a kid, and this is actually universal. As we grow up, we all start to revert back to our childhood in some shape, form, or fashion. We start to collect the things that we remembered collecting as kids, and watching the movies we did as kids, and that's universal throughout. And so, getting back to like the 1930s, I really I really enjoy the 1933 Gaudi, and I've written two very extensive articles on this particular set. In fact, I'm thinking about writing a book maybe next year about the Gaudi company. I don't think that anything has been written extensively about it, although what I was able to find really astounded me. When I see these cards, I immediately think of the Great Depression. I start thinking back to what it was like for my grandparents who were living in Iowa, and my grandmother was very quiet about the Great Depression, and this was a time when she really loved baseball. She had gone to the 1931 World Series. 1926, she has spoken about it on a few occasions. So I have to assume that she was at that, but she definitely saw the 1934 World Series, and she was a Cardinals fan. What's interesting here is that she was not a fan of my baseball card collection. She didn't understand it at all. And I kept on trying to tell her, I'm like, listen, you're a baseball fan. She knew a lot of the Cardinals players through her family, through her brothers, and my great grandfather was a sports reporter, so she knew the Dizzy Dean. She knew Dizzy Dean and Dazzy Dean. She knew a lot of those players, and so like she had really fond memories of uh, watching the Cardinals. And she said like the Browns really sucked, basically, so she didn't like to see them. But well, she said they weren't very good. But in any case, she was a lifelong baseball fan, but she just hated my card collection. She didn't understand that well, first off, she said, if your cards are worth whatever you say they are, then you should sell them. And I kept on saying, like, to her, well, that's not why I collect cards. I am very content with the cards that I have. I could stop right now, but what would I do afterwards? Nature abhors a vacuum. It has to. There has to be something there. If you get rid of God, you're going to replace that with something else, and it could be worse. So, anyway, I saw the 1833 Gaudi, Vernon Gomez, or Lefty Gomez. Sometimes he was called Goofy Gomez, and this actually could be considered his rookie card. I actually spoke to Victor, the rookie card specialist, and asked him if this was his rookie, and I think he said that he also definitely has a 1933 D Long and a 1932 U.S. Caramel. However, the U.S. Caramel set is now considered a 1933 issue. So maybe all three are rookie cards, but he came up in, I believe, late 1931, and these cards have held up really well over the last 90 years compared to some of their other contemporaries. And it's a set that a guy like Woody Scharf would have gone after when he was a kid in 1933, and Lionel Carter as well. And those guys are like 10, 11 years old, and they would have gone after these cards right here in this set, and I love the artwork of this set, and it's very meaningful to me because when I see these cards, I instantaneously think, or ask myself, what was it like for card collectors back in 1933 when they were opening up these cards, these packs, and it definitely harkens back to a time in American history that will never happen again. You're not just looking at the cards; you're looking at the history surrounding the card as well. And again, too, with these particular cards, probably maybe more so than these, but again, they're both very historical card sets, and the collectors back in the 1930s, the hobby pioneers who were just collecting these cards, just starting out, they didn't know what happened to Gaudi as a company until decades later afterwards. It actually closed its doors in November of 1962, and there wasn't a whole lot of information about that or about the company until 1969, when a professor ended up contacting the last president of Gaudi, and he made some astounding finds, corporate documents as well, copyright cards and patent cards and all this other stuff, and so that's where all of our information comes from of the company. But the artwork in this set is incredible. It's really top notch, and I really enjoy it. And I think any card collector who wants to get into vintage, you guys can pick these up, I think, fairly affordably these days. This one was it was about like $225, just being his rookie, and again, the corners on these can be a little rough, and especially the centering will get you. The borders themselves are very thin, but yeah, that was a fantastic card. And then another 1933 Gaudi here of Bill Dickey, and this wasn't on my radar either, although I did want this card. I kind of like just stumbled across it, not expecting it. This is actually a very expensive card compared to a lot of his other cards out there. And I think Bill Dickey, he's just missed the 1927 Yankees, the Murderers Row, by 1 year. He came up in 1928. This card was quite expensive. It was a $300 card, and I was shocked. I was like, "Oh my God, you have got to be kidding me!" I bought it from a friend of mine because he's my friend, and I really did want the card. There's a few cards that from not just Gaudi but in general that I have made a list of my last 20 cards that I'm going to get before I ended up quote unquote retiring from the hobby, which I think is going to happen quicker than I think. I've already been in the hobby now for 40 plus years, and a little over 30 of that has been in vintage. So, and I'm 48 now, so you can do the math. 1991. So, anyway, it's been a long time, and it's time to I don't want to quit, but I think I may be forced. But Bill Dickey here, his number 8 has been retired by the Yankees, and number 8 was also Yogi Berra, which is retired. But I want to say that Bill Dickey really helped out Yogi Berra when he first came up, and I'll show you the back. Sometimes these cards will bleed through, and that actually is a very good sign that says your card has not been tampered with or is a reprint. So you you do want to see that for the most part on your 33 Gaudis in 1934 as well. And some 1934 Gaudis look better than the 1933, but they did something with the ink that the printing is a little bit different. And another 1933 Gaudi here that I picked up is the Earl Averill, and I've wanted this card for as long as I can remember. And he's not as well known as he should be or was, but you guys can look up his stats. They are amazing. And this card is just the artwork is amazing. His PCL numbers when he was in the Pacific Coast League are crazy. I think he's in the PCL Hall of Fame. Alright, so I know that the camera isn't really picking this up very well, but if you are going after both of these cards, either one of them, sometimes the faces are going to be a little blurry because they're far away, but I want you guys to just be aware of that. And the lefty Gomez here, his face is a little bit out of register, but his body isn't. I really didn't have much of a choice in that. I really wanted the card, and I really had to settle. I mean, I'm not gonna like go and buy another card to replace either one of these. I really wanted both of them, and because of who they were as players. And so another Bill Dickey card here, and I was not expecting to actually purchase this card. It wasn't on my radar at all. I just saw it and I'm like, I love that card. I love the photo. And if you're gonna collect the batter ups here from National Chickle, it's really all about player selection and photography, and maybe sometimes the fact that a lot of these cards have different colors. So if you want to do a color run, I don't know how far that's going to get you or how costly that will be, but these cards for the most part are not going to break the bank. This one was actually quite affordable, and I didn't even know that. First off, I didn't even see any other of these cards. As I didn't see this card there other than this, so there weren't a whole lot of them. And it was kind of funny going through the aisles. There were cards that I had expected to see and I didn't. For the most part, it was very rare that I would come across a 41 play ball Ted Williams or a Joe DiMaggio. They weren't all that plentiful there. Some years you're going to see a whole lot of the same card, and some years you're just not going to. But this card I thought was absolutely fantastic. And again, the cards, I'm not sure where the cards were printed, but the company itself, the manufacturer, was at 804 or 805 Main Street in Cambridge, Mass. And that location now is a post office. It's still around. The building is still standing, which I thought was really amazing. And so the company itself went bankrupt in 1937, mostly I think due to the same economic circumstances that was surrounding Gaudi, but Gaudi was able to hold on there for a short time. They actually were purchased in 1937, and I'm still trying to figure out by who. Their assets, I think, ended up with Gaudi in like 1938 or so, and that's why you see in 1939 Gaudi, they don't really look all that well. They don't look good, but also if you're gonna pick up a 1939 Gaudi premium, Ted Williams rookie is also in that set too, and Vince DiMaggio has a card as well. I actually have the original photo. So this was a really great pickup, I think. And then I picked up this particular card here of this is Billy Herman, and you guys can look up Billy Herman's stats. I think they're okay. One thing that a lot of people might not take in consideration when they see some of these players get in the Hall of Fame, and they ask themselves, with these guys' stats, how did they get in the Hall of Fame? Aside from Frankie Frisch getting a lot of his friends in the Hall of Fame, that was back in like the late '60s through the early '70s. Him and Bill Terry ended up getting like at least 7 of their friends who were on the Cardinals or the Giants into the Hall of Fame. Guys who had like absolutely no right to be there. Guys like Chick Hafey, Pop Haynes, Jesse Haynes, and George High Pockets Kelly is another one. I don't think that's the case with him at all. I think he's pretty solid, but a lot of people they might not know the circumstances surrounding certain ball players getting in the Hall of Fame, and you have to think of who the electorate was back in, say, the 1930s, 40s, or 50s, or even 60s, and who their friends were. And sometimes it's not as obvious as Frankie Frisch, being the head of the Veterans Committee and peer pressuring or even downright threatening other voters. But I think that he's pretty solid, and this is a 1933 tattoo orbit, and when I think of tattoo orbit, the chewing gum, and that's exactly what it is. I've already started a pretty lengthy article on this set, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. But and with me, I dive more into the history surrounding this stuff, and it just goes in directions that I've never really considered, or anybody else. So just like a sneak peek here, the set was founded not in Chicago, and I think William Wrigley had a little bit of a hand with this set, which is unusual because you don't think of Wrigley Chewing Gum as a sports card manufacturer. Orbit gum is still around, and every time I munch into a piece of Orbit gum, I'm thinking of this set. But it's definitely Art Deco. It tells the story of the Great Depression, I think, perfectly with the style. And these cards you have to be really careful of because they're very, very thin. And this one is actually, it has a crease in it. I paid $150 for this card. Actually, no, I paid $125 for this card. And unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with this set, and one is because they are thin, they can get damaged quite easily. There's a key card in here, the James Levy card in the tattoo orbit, that is key, and I know why it is. I'm going to keep that close to myself right now and tell you guys a little bit later. Like, I hate to do that, but I don't want to spoil it. So this was a really interesting find. And going back to the 1970s, if you were collecting these cards, say like 1977, the average common was going for about $10 a piece. So they were highly prized back in the day, and today I'm not entirely sure how prized they are, but this was a fantastic card. It's not his rookie card. He's got a 1932 Charles Dunby postcard, and the Cubs were actually in the middle of being a very dominant team in the late 1920s and 30s, and they went to the World Series a few times. 29, they lost. I want to say 1938, and then a few other times. I think 35 as well. So they were a very, very solid team back then. So the last card that I'm going to show you from the National is this Ernie Banks that I picked up. And this is interesting because it does say authentic altered, but when I checked it against this card right here, the Monty Irvin, it lines up perfectly. It's not trimmed at all. So I'm not entirely sure where the alteration comes from and why it is authentic, because it meets the measure. It meets all the measurements. So again, like if you guys could tell me in the comments section below, like I would love to know, um, why this is authentic altered if it if it's not been trimmed. At some point, the hobby's going to have a very serious conversation about the prices that are being paid for a lot of these cards. And, you guys already know what I've paid for these because I've told you, I've been very transparent about what I've paid. But you also would know too, had you looked them up. And you can't really escape that. So it's not like I was not going to tell you guys. I kind of have to. But try to tell that to somebody who is not a card collector, what you pay for your cards. They're not going to understand that. They're going to think that you're nuts. And, I've had that conversation with my grandmother. Obviously, I just told you guys that if in her mind, there's someone who was born in the 19 teens, that if your cards were worth something, then, you could sell them and try getting that money, is basically what she had said. She would be astounded today about what these cards are worth. And Jefferson Burdick would also be astounded. I don't think that Jefferson Burdick or Lionel Carter or Buck Barker, I don't think that they would really like the hobby today and the direction it's going in. I think they would be disgusted. In fact, I know that Lionel Carter was pretty disgusted about the hobby. And then it was back in 1984, and he quit because he didn't like the values or the prices that were being paid for cards back in 1984, or at least the early 80s. And so I have a very hard time now trying to justify the prices that I've paid for this. And I'm not a flipper. This is for my personal collection. These are actually, in some strange way, these are my memories of when I was a young card collector and wanting to get into this stuff. I started out as a vintage card collector for a few reasons. First off, it is a second education for me. Probably more importantly, though, it kept me out of trouble. And it kept me from doing drugs and illicit substances, drinking. I had every excuse in the book. I've had a very difficult life. Uh, personally, physically, it's been very difficult for me. So I would have every excuse in the book to pick up the bottle or do some kind of drug. But I've seen that. I've seen what it happens. Okay, I lost my parents because of that stuff. So baseball cards for me is very different. Collecting is very different for me than it is for a lot of other people. I I did it as an escape, and it's still an escape. Okay, and it's not about the money. The money is secondary, if not at the very least of why I collect cards. Okay, I don't go home and I don't drink. I don't go to bars. I don't hang out with funny women. Although someone would say that they're funny that I hang out with, but that's a different story. I try to live as cleanly as possible, and cards are my escape from my daily reality. Not just being a disabled person, which is difficult enough as it is. Even doing videos is very challenging. You don't know what's going on in somebody's mind or in their life. For me, going to the national, going to a city, and being in an airplane, if you're afraid of heights, that itself was a huge monumental leap for me. I was at a city that I knew nothing about, except that I've been told since the day I was born that Chicago is a very dangerous place. It's in a lot of places in Chicago. It's even more dangerous than Iraq. Okay, during the Iraq War, and so I I've had it in my mind to, and it doesn't matter what city I'm in, you have to be very cautious and and what is going on. And while I don't have my head on a swivel, my father was in a lot of fights when he was when he was basically in a gang. He was in a biker back in the late 60s and 70s. And that's a story I'll probably cover at some other point too, because it actually does have an impact on my card collecting. So a lot of dealers there, I noticed, had security. And if you have security, if you have to have security at your booth, you know that your cards are probably, even if they're overvalued, you know that your cards are extremely valuable. And you have some protection maybe if you have security. But even so, there were certain instances of theft at the National. And I don't like to blame people specifically, but there was two thefts, two highly publicized thefts of cards of $2 million each, and some of those cards were not recoverable. And you have to be very cognizant again of where you are. You are in a dangerous city, Chicago. Any city you go into, you have to be very aware of your surroundings. And again, we take these things for granted. Okay, a lot of the hobby does not acknowledge this stuff, or even if they do, they forget very quickly. The attention spans today are very short, and so I had actually I was very nervous in Chicago the entire time. I did not feel good at all being in this city that I had no idea about, and it's very foreign to me. I know Boston, and even in parts of Boston, it's not like there's no go zones, but you do have to be very careful, and it's just the way it goes now. But you're kind of asking for trouble if as a dealer and even as a collector carrying this stuff around now. I did see a card that was priced at $55,000. Now, why or how on God's green earth are you going to sell a card, especially in Chicago, $55,000? Who the heck has that kind of money? A lot of times you have to read the room, and if you, as a dealer, get into a card that you've gotten way over your head on, I can understand that. But again, we're expecting collectors to have all this cash on us, and I did see a lot of that too, wads of hundreds at a show, and you're really not sending the right message here. This really shouldn't be a rich man's game. It really shouldn't. This should be inclusive to all. It's really not a inclusive hobby anymore. I mean, it should be, and it was when I was a kid, but things have changed greatly, and it's the money that we're paying for this stuff. It really doesn't make any sense anymore. It's way too overvalued. A Market Movers by Sports Card Investor video, it was entitled "These Cards Might Be Worthless Soon." And that was by a guy named Teapot, and I don't know a whole lot about him, but he had said something really funny where Larry Doby was going to be worthless in the future. Well, I mean, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, truly. Everything I've seen says that Larry Doby's cards have gone up, especially his rookie, which is $1,200 or more now. Some of the prices paid on this stuff is because we want this stuff. We want these cards, and a lot of people will pay anything to get them, regardless if it puts them in debt. In a lot of cases, the hobby now is just a casino, and that's it, especially in the modern side of the hobby, which really bothers me because when you see something like the Market Movers video here, these cards might be worth less soon. There's another video that I saw of Jeff Wilson, and again, I don't like to say Jeff Wilson's name 3 times fast because Beetlejuice may appear, and nobody wants that. He actually bought a 1955 Bowman baseball pack for $5,000, and he essentially turned $5,000 into $20 within minutes because he doesn't understand the vintage side of the hobby. In fact, I think that is probably the worst investing advice you could ever get or receive is through Jeff Wilson. First off, I can't relate to Jeff Wilson or anything that he does. Okay, if he wants to open up a pack of 1955 Bowman baseball cards with his own money, that's fine. Okay, but you're sending the wrong message here. You can look at this screenshot of Jeff Wilson's videos here, and I'm telling you this for anybody who's just getting into the hobby and they see this, they think that this is normal. I guarantee you this is not normal. He's a gambler, okay? And if he was honest about what he was doing, that's one thing. I don't think he's being honest on a lot of his videos. I hate to say this about people. I really do. I don't like to attack people, which you don't know if this stuff is staged. It looks like, from what other collectors and dealers have said, that a lot of the stuff is staged. And it definitely, even if it isn't, it definitely sends the wrong message that you have to have a lot of money to get into this hobby. And unfortunately, though, that's what it appears. I paid a lot for these cards, and I may not get my money back. It doesn't even matter at this point if I do, because I'm not intending to sell this stuff. But if you're a collector, I can't even call Jeff Wilson a collector because I don't think he is. I mean, he may be, but he's not a traditional collector. He'll sell a lot of his stuff and get out and move on to something else. And he can leave you holding the bag for his bad investing advice. And cards are not a traditional investment. There's no brokerage firm that you can go to sell your cards. And, your collection has a ceiling. The amount of money that somebody is willing or can pay for your collection will vary greatly. If your significant other is stuck with your cards because you have gone on to the field of dreams, and then it's going to happen to everybody. But say that you do end up going on to the field of dreams, your card collection could be a burden to your significant other, your wife or husband or a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. They might not know what to do with your collection once you have passed on. And it could definitely be a burden to them. How are they actually going to sell your cards if that time comes? Who do they go to? How much are they actually going to get? Okay, I mean, first off, they will never understand the time and energy and a lot of times finances that you put into your collection. They'll never understand that, and it could be very difficult for them to actually understand what you paid for your cards. Again, if I were to explain any of this to a non-collector, they would think that I have gone crazy. Sometimes I actually think I've gone crazy paying for this stuff because it won't make sense to them. I guarantee you it won't make sense. You can try to explain to them till they're blue in the face, but if they're not as passionate about the hobby as you are, good luck with that. And I'm not trying to be mean or nasty about this at all, but again, theft also occurred at this national too, and I as much as I'd love to blame one person, again, I can't blame Jeff Wilson for everything, but I think he is a part of a larger problem here that has started prior to the pandemic, say in like 2017, 2018, definitely by 2020, you had a lot of people come in, a lot of foreign investors come in, foreign money come in and purchase a lot of sports cards. And again, like I kind of have to think in the back of my mind that at least some of that was money laundering. And we do know that money laundering does happen in the hobby, okay, but to what extent, I couldn't tell you. A lot of Chinese investors, a lot of Chinese money came in as well. and you also had a time where during the pandemic where a lot of places were closed, a lot of people were losing their jobs, and they either got fired for various reasons, but they were looking for other ways to make money, and the hobby looked like one of the best ways to do that, particularly because you're not paying any capital gains taxes because these are not traditional investments. There's no brokerage firm that you can go to sell your cards. If your collection is valuable enough, I think the only way you can safely sell it is through an auction house, and there again they're going to take like 30%. Okay, but for the most part, I hate to say this about my collection, but I often think like what's going to happen to my collection once I'm gone. Like I put a lot of time, resources, and finances into my collection, and I value my collection more than the monetary value of it. It's been very good to me. Okay, I've learned a lot from my collection, not just economics, but an actual real education that I did not receive in school. I used to be very bitter about that fact, and I had every right to be bitter about the fact that I did not have a good education, partly because of my disability. It's a different story altogether, but the hobby and your cards can teach you very valuable lessons. One of those is economics. Is it economically feasible for you to be purchasing a card for $725 or 500? Actually, I paid a little bit over $500 for this card, $550 I believe, and an authentic altered. Or is it a good idea for Jeff Wilson to open a pack of 1955 Bowman baseball for $5,000? And anybody who's been in the hobby for a certain amount of time and knows vintage would say, don't follow what this guy says. Don't do what he just did. That is a very, very risky move with a low turnaround. You're not going to get your money back at all. Like who's actually getting money, right, other than the manufacturers? Who's making out on the modern side? And that's one of the reasons. That's one of the things that we saw as modern collectors in the late 1980s and early 1990s, before the so-called crash. It wasn't really a crash. Everything went down to 40%. The hobby is kind of cyclical. It's like a dog chasing its tail. Like everything that is happening now has really kind of happened prior, but it's a little bit different. I mean, the technology is different, and the way we get our cards is different now too. But we've seen a lot of the stuff that's going on now happen prior. It's just that people have such short-term memories, or they haven't learned anything about the history of the hobby to know enough. And this isn't really unique to the hobby either. How many people actually start a new job and know anything about the history of the company that they work for, right? Hardly anybody. When you collect cards and when you collect vintage cards, you should have at least a rudimentary understanding of hobby history, and what these cards have gone for in the past. Because these cards are so valuable now, it's really become a burden for a lot of people to keep them. I can't keep this stuff in my house. I have to have a safe deposit box for this stuff now, which kind of defeats the purpose of a collection. I take photos of everything now, and I have a list of everything that I own, and that's just in case. Again, you have to worry about theft, fire, water damage, natural events, and don't expect that the insurance companies are going to pay out if there is actually a theft. I'll tell you a real quick story about this. So, a buddy of mine he had been the victim of a theft, but also the perpetrators had stalked him from his place of employment to his house to his warehouse to find out where these cards were, and it took months. So they were stalking him for months, and once they found out where he kept his cards, they robbed him. And my buddy got a phone call from a dealer that said that he knew what my buddy had, and it was because his cards were that rare that, and there weren't that many of them, that he knew exactly whose cards these were, and he called my buddy to tell him that a few people came in to sell his cards, and he called the cops, and he had film footage, and he had photos of a lot of this stuff with the shirts, right? And they were all graded. We, his friends, me and a few other guys, we saw at least one of these guys at the Shriners, and we followed him, and we asked him questions. He had my buddy's cards with him, and anyway, that case ended up in court, and my buddy lost his case because the judge in the case did not understand, even despite the fact that he had evidence that this guy did steal the cards. I think this guy even said that he stole the cards, but the judge said, "How do I know that these are your cards?" And he lost his case. The other thing too is that the insurance company didn't pay out fully. So don't ever expect an insurance company to pay you what you think your cards are worth. And even if they do pay you, there's no guarantee that you're ever going to be able to replace those cards. Okay? A lot of these cards are now irreplaceable. I can't afford to replace my card collection. And again, I hate to say that your card collection can be a burden, especially for your significant other and your family. But because they are now worth more than I ever intended or thought that they would be, back in the 1990s or even 1980s, you could actually pick up a lot of these cards. Say like the Jerry West here. I actually had to. I bought this card after the National. It was just something I really wanted to do. I couldn't get my hands on a Jerry West rookie, so this was the second best thing, and I'm going to go over this particular card in a different video. There was a theft at the National, a 1951 Bowman Mickey Mantle rookie, and an 86 Fleer Michael Jordan. Again, like, this requires a serious discussion about what we are doing, what we are purchasing at these shows, and the cards that we're carrying around with us, and the money that we are carrying around, and what dealers expect us to pay for these cards. And what we bring home with us, for the most part, like, we're paying thousands and thousands of dollars for this stuff. So just ask Greg from Midlife Cards what he paid for his T206 Ty Cobb or his Cy Young, and the hoops that he went through, and what he had to go through to actually purchase those cards. Those cards were affordable for the most part. I mean, prior to the pandemic, and now we have to essentially sell kidneys to purchase this stuff, and it's a liability for a lot of us. And I'm not entirely sure if dealers actually understand this. As a dealer, you're opening yourself up for theft, okay? And you're opening up card collectors for theft as well. Not just their cards, but their money. And I can't stress this enough. And when you see something like what Jeff Wilson has up here, I first off, I can't relate to any of this stuff. This sounds so amazing to me, and not in a good way. This tells people that you have to have a lot of money on you to purchase this stuff. You can make a lot of money off of it as well, but how accurate is it? It could be staged. You just don't know if you're a new collector and this is the first thing you see. You don't know how real it is. Like Jeff Wilson is talking about theft at the National. Well, he's a part of the problem. I'm sorry to say that, Jeff. When you're telling people you just lost thousands of dollars on a card or a trade, or you're buying cards here for $25,000, First off, you're not relatable. I can't relate to you. I don't know if your fan base can relate to you as well. Are we buying cards off the credit card? Is that happening? Are cards being sold through money laundering? Are they being bought and sold through money laundering? Because we know that does happen. Are we being honest with ourselves about what we are doing, buying and selling these cards? Is it just for the flip? That can't make you happy, by the way. All this is, and all what Jeff Wilson appears to be doing, is gambling. And he's telling young collectors that you have to be a gambler. You have to take a lot of risks. And even with repacks, breakers, I think that side of the hobby actually could start regulation. And I don't think that the hobby can regulate itself at this point. I think that anybody who's not a card collector, and all it takes is some board legislator or legislature that has nothing better to do, that has a mother or somebody who has lost thousands of dollars, go and say, hey, listen, we need you to regulate this stuff. And if they regulate this stuff, game over for everybody, because it's just not going to hit repackers. And I'm not entirely sure how legal that is. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I kind of often wonder about this stuff too, the legality of some of the stuff that's going on in the hobby. Mostly, I think just looking at Jeff Wilson's videos, he seems to be all about the money and the cards, the players, the hobby history. He doesn't really know a whole lot about, especially vintage. Because if I was in his case, if I was an investor, a sports card investor, I would tell you the first thing is, if you come across a vintage pack, do not open it. You're not going to get your money. It is not there. Okay, that's the stupidest thing in the world. And if I followed anything that Jeff Wilson said, I'd probably go to prison. Okay, or at least have the IRS breathe down my neck. And I'm not entirely sure or convinced that a lot of Jeff Wilson's videos are not staged. A lot of people say that there are videos that are staged. A lot of these deals that have gone down, especially in the modern side, are not legit. So you have to be careful of this. Listen, I had a great time at the National. I learned a lot. I met a lot of great people, and I had a lot of great pickups. But there are disadvantages of this, and you guys need to be aware of this, and I think a lot of you are. So I think we're going to have a serious conversation, as John Mangini had said in one of his videos, or two of his videos, that we're going to have a serious conversation about what we are doing in the hobby in terms of value. Obviously, the thefts of the 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle and 86 Fleer Michael Jordan, not awesome. We've had two $2 million thefts. That should have woken up the hobby. Obviously, it didn't do that. People are still continuing doing what they're always done, which, again, like you need to look back at your hobby history so you don't repeat it. And, Raul from AIH Sports always says that, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And I believe that. If you know that these cards are probably more valuable, or you're putting sticker prices on cards, are just astronomically expensive, and you're expecting people to pay for this, that's really bananas to me. Don't think it's very smart for you to be doing that as a dealer, to be bringing this stuff. You're essentially putting a bullseye on your back, right? When you do this stuff, it's up to you. It's your cards, but don't be surprised if there is a theft. I don't think that Jeff Wilson is responsible for this stuff, but I think his actions don't help the situation by putting videos like this up, and by telling people, obviously it's the wrong thing. Obviously, does he know that? I have no idea. He could be as crooked as the day is long, as far as I'm concerned. He might not have a damn care in the world about you, the collector, or what he is doing. He's looking out for himself, obviously, and that's fine. But, again, be honest. And again, Jeff, dude, it, if you make a mistake, that's fine. You know, everybody makes mistakes, but own up to your mistakes. Be honest and transparent about what you're doing. I don't like to bash people, and Jeff Wilson, he does this to himself. He's probably his own worst enemy. I don't think he's very ethical, but that's just me. That's appearances obviously can be deceiving, but I don't think that he's very ethical. Why would you try to burn down half the hobby in the process of trying to quote unquote 10x the hobby when you're alienating half of the hobby, the vintage guys, right? And saying they're too old and too crusty and they're too this, and you know the national. I think he said that you know a guy like him should be in charge of the national. You know the national has done very well before Jeff Wilson ever got involved. You know they've had like 45 years to perfect this. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. No organization is perfect. No person is perfect. And that's what makes us human. But I wouldn't take Jeff Wilson's advice, especially on the national. You know, the national already looks like a half of a circus, you know, a three-ring circus, and so maybe you do need that section, that circus section of the hobby, or the national, but it shouldn't be first and foremost. You need collectors. You need people to remain in the hobby, and if you burn these people, they're never going to come back. So you have to be very judicious in your expectations of what you want these your prices to be. Now, if you actually overcharge, if you pay too much for your cards and expect you can't expect other people to buy $55,000 cards. Your margin there is very narrow. You have to have the right person at the right place, time, and wallet. I did enjoy the national. There was a lot of research that I did there as well. And again, when you're going into a neighborhood that you're not familiar with, or a city that you're not familiar with, like I was in Chicago, you have to really kind of be very observant. And unfortunately, even when you're at the national, there wasn't a whole lot of people who were observant. There was so much going on. There was so much to distract you from what you were doing, and dealers put themselves at risk, and collectors put themselves at risk as well. And theft happens quite often. And this is the point that I'm trying to make to you guys. Um, you know, and I can't really say that Jeff Wilson is the primary problem with this, because I don't think it's just Jeff Wilson, though he doesn't help himself at all. Quite frankly, he makes himself look like an ass. You know, and again, I understand what you guys could easily say to me, well, hey, listen, you're going after Jeff Wilson for all the crap that he does. But, like, again, like, you say and ah a lot, and you can't string two sentences together. Like, I understand that. I completely get it. I understand how I work, how I function. Even if my viewers might not, or they don't like my channel, they can always say, nope, this isn't for me. And that's fine too. You get what you get here. Okay, I'm not flashy for the most part. I'm not flashy. I am authentic. I am my authentic self. I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not. And I try to give you guys as much information as possible, and honest information for you guys, so you guys don't get ripped off, that you guys do have fun in the hobby. And there could be somebody out there who wants to get into vintage and that maybe doesn't know how. Okay, I mean, I was there. I think we all were there at one point. You know, we all decided we wanted to get into vintage. But you know, when I was a kid, I could get into vintage, and I would be financially okay. I wouldn't go homeless buying cards. I wouldn't go into debt buying cards. I really want to know why the hobby is becoming so unaffordable for the average collector. The guy who wakes up early in the morning and goes to bed late at night, and he has to support a family, and you know he's paying through the nose for a lot of cards that normally he shouldn't be paying a lot for, but now he's paying thousands of dollars for cards that are a one or authentic or altered, like this card may be. I'm not even entirely sure about that. I mean, again, I really wanted Ernie Banks rookie in my collection since I was a little kid, because Ernie Banks has a storied career and he's a very historic person. Cards like this may be overvalued, and I think we need to have a serious conversation about what we are doing with these cards, why we're paying so much for them. Specifically, when I can remember a time when you could buy an average Hall of Famer, a T206 or a T205, for 30 to 40, $50, sometimes $60. Okay, and we have a lot of financial data to back that up. And now all of a sudden, we're going into debt for cards that are either authentic, altered, or poor fair condition, which we wouldn't have done in the past. There's a lot more money in the hobby now, and we have to kind of ask ourselves, is it the fault of the corporations, the corporate side of the hobby, like the Jeff Wilsons? You can't blame Jeff Wilson for everything. It wouldn't be right and it wouldn't be fair, but I think he has a lot to say and do with the overvaluation of our cards. Granted, supply and demand is one of the key tenets of economics, but there's a lot of cards. These cards are not rare. Topps does not have a lot of very rare cards that are vintage. And what's the hobby going to look like in 30, 40 years from now? Are we going to have one? Is it going to be regulated because of the breakers and the repackers and the corporate side of the hobby? Are they going to force a look into the hobby and what people are paying for it? Again, all it takes is one person to get ripped off by a guy like Jeff Wilson to say, well, to have the legislature go and look at it and say, yeah, we have to regulate this because too many people are losing their shirts and going into debt for this. The repackers and the breakers might force a look into this hobby and ruin it for everybody, not just them, but for everybody. And so I think we need to have an honest conversation about the prices that we're paying for these cards and the dealer's expectations of this. And is it fair? Is it right? Is it morally right? You can always walk away from a deal. You don't have to buy cards. I did so out of my own volition, and there's certain reasons why. As a dealer standpoint, do you have unrealistic expectations of what your cards are worth? As a collector, do you have that fear of missing out so much, or to keep up with the Joneses so much that you need to go into debt because you see what's going on YouTube or what other people have, and you're like, I want that card too, no matter what? So guys, I'm going to leave it here. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section below. I just keep it PG, no swearing, no anything like that. But I always get to you guys, and the thing is, like, I did see a number of YouTubers there, which is great, and a lot of content creators. I always tell you guys, if you want to start a channel, do so. It doesn't have to be sports cards. It can be anything you want. What I like about, first off, doing videos for me is very difficult. And I have like the video version of Steve Sachs disease. So this is extremely difficult for me. And I still do it because, there's part of me that really enjoys it. But at the same time, it is very challenging to do videos. And I'm extremely busy, and I don't always do these things. But I always recommend that if you want to start a channel and see where it takes you. And you may enjoy it, you may not. It might not be for you. People in the hobby come and go, and just in life, people come and go. The hobby, as far as I'm concerned, especially on YouTube here, Sammy Thunder came out with something very interesting, and he asked the question: is the hobby excluding uh, uh, content creators? And or to that effect, is it too hard for content creators to get on other channels, to talk about things with other collectors, to even be invited on other channels? And I had thought about that, and I was like, that is a very interesting question, and it is not unusual. This has gone on since the 1930s, except we're not dealing with Jefferson Burdick's crew, because a lot of those hobby pioneers were very insulated and they didn't let anybody into their club. So this is really nothing new. What Sammy was talking about, it's just a different version here. And the thing is, like, you can open your channel to anybody you want to. You don't have to be exclusionary. So the one thing that I really enjoy about the YouTube content is that, first off, I get to see a lot of other great content creators who have different thoughts than I do, and even if they don't want to discuss the hobby with me on their channel, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't exclude me from commenting on their channel. I can do so without having to appear on their channel. It's a privilege. There's a lot of commenters that don't want to be on a channel. They don't want to be interviewed. It takes a lot of guts, if you will, to actually start a channel and put yourself out there. That's true for everybody. I think that's definitely true for writers, for sure. And it takes a lot of courage to be a writer or to be a YouTuber. Not just the content that you make, but to actually present yourself on a YouTube channel, on a video. A lot of people, it's not for everybody, and so I understand it takes courage, and to have enough content. I'll have enough content until the day I die. I am pretty confident in that. Whether or not I continue in this form or fashion, I have no idea. Personally, I don't like I don't like it. I'm not very good at. I don't think I'm very good at this. Other people may disagree and they like my content, and so, like, that's not really up for me to say whether or not I'm good. My analytics and my statistics will say, really, like, how well I'm performing, and there is a lot of ums and ahs in there, and I don't think that that's something that I can help. I could try as much as possible, but at the end of the day, I'm just lucky that a I have a job. I can walk. I can talk. The little things in life that we take for granted, I certainly don't. I'm physically disabled. I am very, very fortunate in life that I do have a job that I can hold down. I can walk. Not very good anymore. I used to be a four sport athlete, and now I can barely walk. I use a cane. But again, sports cards has really gotten me through a lot of tough times, and I don't think that a lot of people really understand that that sports cards are more than the monetary value that we place on them, or what we purchase these cards for. A guy like Jeff Wilson, I don't think he understands that. Again, Jeff, be authentic, and people know when you're being fake, when you're being a fraud. People, they see that, they definitely do. Um, and so if you are contemplating being a content creator, be yourself, be authentic. Don't change you for anybody. Just be yourself, and people will appreciate you for that. If I say and ah a lot, and I sometimes may skip my words, that's more likely because of my disability. I can't hide my disability anymore like I used to. I'm stuck with this. I'm stuck with my body. I understand who I am. I'm comfortable with who I am, and I wouldn't tell anybody to change for anybody. Be yourself. And guys, I'm gonna leave it there because I ran very long. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section below. Just keep it G-rated or PG or whatever, not anything else. Um, and I will always get back to you. And again, like the one of the good things about having a small channel like this is I can concentrate on all of you. My 650 subscribers or however I have. I don't have many subscribers, and that's not even the point of my channel. It doesn't matter how many subscribers I have. I'm very fortunate and very surprised that I have this many subscribers. But it's not really about the amount of subscriptions that you have, subscribers that you have. It's really about the length of time that someone will listen or watch your channel. That really matters. And so again, guys, I'm babbling here because I really enjoy the sound of my voice, which you probably don't. But again, again, I really appreciate you guys listening to what I have to say and commenting below. And the comments are really what I really like to interact with you guys about. And even if nobody wants to interact with me face to face on a video, that's okay. It's just that I get to hear from all of you guys and pay more attention to what you guys are saying. That is, I think, really important. And the people are more important, I think, than the cards themselves. After all, this hobby was founded by people and founded by a gentleman, Jefferson Burdick, who was disabled and needed really something to do. And, I really thank Jefferson Burdick for this as well. He dedicated his life to the hobby, literally, and I was just kind of shocked and surprised that nobody knew who Jefferson Burdick was at the National. And I had a really nice shirt that said, "Jefferson Burdick, you are my hero." Again, like, Jefferson Burdick is only one of my heroes. My dad is the other. And my grandfathers fought in World War II. My cousins, especially my family. But again, you guys can do anything you put your mind to. You just have to believe in yourself. And even if you don't succeed, at least you tried. And that's really all I want for you guys, is to try. You don't have to succeed, but just do what makes you happy in the end, and try it out, try everything. All right, guys, I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you in another video. Bye.